Section 8 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book first, The Simple Cognitive or Presentative Powers, Self-Consciousness, Part 1. By this power, we know self in its present state as acting and being acted on. Section 1. It makes known self, as well as the acts of self. At the same time that we perceive by the senses, we are conscious of ourselves as perceiving. These two exercises are, in many respects, like each other. In both, we perceive an object. By the senses, we perceive an object external and extended, this table or that chair. But in consciousness, we also perceive an object. We perceive self in a certain state, as thinking or as feeling, as in joy or in grief. By the one, we know the various properties of matter as they come under our notice. By the other, we know the various states of self. It is of importance to notice that in self-consciousness, we come to have a knowledge of self in a particular state. According to D. Stewart in the Scottish School, we know only the qualities of things and not the things themselves. The correct statement is that we know the thing as exercising a quality. According to Kant and his school, we know simply phenomena, that is, appearances and not things. But there never can be an appearance without a thing appearing. In self-consciousness, we know the thing, the very thing, as appearing or as presenting itself to us. We have as clear and certain proof of our knowing the object, that is, the thinking self, as we have that there is before us an appearance. Consciousness accompanies all mental exercises. In this respect, consciousness differs in its mode of exercise from the other powers of the mind. I am not every instant remembering or judging or willing, but at every waking moment of my existence, I am conscious. When I perceive a material object, when I recollect an occurrence, when I draw an inference, when I am sorrowing or rejoicing, when I am wishing or willing, I am conscious that I do so. In short, consciousness seems inseparable from the exercise of all our faculties, and to accompany every operation of the mind. It was an opinion entertained by Leibniz, and has been held by many since his time, that we are unconscious of many of our mental operations. They point to acts of mind which have left effects behind them, but of which we have not the dimmest recollection. We are sure that we must have issued a great many volitions in passing from one place to another, but after they are over we cannot recollect one of them. The question arises, how are we to account for such a phenomenon? I believe it can all be explained by the ordinary laws of mind, without our calling it such an anomalous principle as unconscious mental action. I hold that we were conscious of the acts at the time, but that they were not retained as there was nothing to fix them in the memory. The exercise of the mind was thus engaged is not unlike that of a man in a boat, looking over its edge into the lake below, thus described by Wordsworth. As one who hangs down, bending from the side of a slow-moving boat upon the breast of a still water, solacing himself with such discoveries as his eyes can make, beneath him in the bottom of the deep, sees many beauteous sights, weeds, fishes, flowers, groats, pebbles, roots of trees, and fancies more, yet often is perplexed and cannot part the shadow from the substance, rocks and sky, mountains and clouds, reflected in the depth of the clear flood, from things which there abide in their own dwelling, nor is crossed by gleam of his own image, by a sunbeam now, and waving motion sent, he knows not whence, impediments that make his task more sweet. Every word of this description might be analogically be applied to the reflex process of the human mind. as it observes its own thoughts and reasonings, its sentiments and emotions. At times there is a dimness in the view which we obtain of them. At times our vision is crossed by a gleam of our own image. That is, our observation of the act so far disturbs the act. The party observing is discomposed by the knowledge of an eye fixed upon him. Or, to vary our image, the thought, when inspected, is so far modified by the inspection as the very thought that a man is sitting for his portrait will so far affect the expression of his countenance. Still, as we thus inspect this deep, we shall see far more beauteous sights than weeds, fishes, flowers, grots, pebbles, roots of trees. We shall see the workings of those thoughts which give to man all his greatness, of those sentiments which give to man all his excellence. Consciousness and personal identity. Consciousness cannot be said to furnish our idea of or belief in our personal identity. But consciousness looks solely to the present, whereas in personal identity there is a comparison between the past and the present. But consciousness reveals self as present. When we remember the past, there is involved a memory of self as remembering. We are thus in a position to compare the two, the present self known and the past self remembered, and we declare the self to be identical. Consciousness thus supplies the two main facts on which our judgment as to personal identity is pronounced. The self at present may be depressed and sad. The self remembered may have been buoyant and joyous, but we declare the two to be the same, and cannot be made to pronounce any other judgment. It is not consciousness, as it has been sometimes asserted, that constitutes our personal identity. Consciousness merely makes it known, or rather makes known the facts on which our judgment rests. We are persons, and we have an identity of person, whether we notice it or no. We are persons, and have an identity of person not because we are conscious of it, but we observe it because it exists. Bishop Berkeley drove the doctrine that in self-perception the mind does not perceive the external object, but an idea in the mind, to its legitimate consequences. He argued that if we do not perceive an extended world, we have no reason to believe that there is any such thing. There has been a like error held in regard to consciousness, by which it is said we know merely phenomena in the sense of appearance. So Kant held merely appearing thoughts and appearing feelings. Victor did this for theory of Kant what Berkeley did for the theory of Locke. He followed it to conclusions from which the founder of the German school shrank. The sum total is this: there is absolutely nothing permanent either without me or within me, but only an unceasing change. I know absolutely nothing of any existence, not even mine own. I myself know nothing, and am nothing. Images there are. They constitute all that apparently exists. And what they know of themselves is after the manner of images. Images that pass and vanish without there being aught to witness their transition. That consist in fact of the image of images without significance and without an aim. I myself am one of these images. All reality is converted into a marvelous dream, without a life to dream of and without a mind to dream, into a dream made up only of a dream of itself. Perception is a dream. Thought, the source of all the existence and of all the reality which I imagine to myself, of my power, my destination, is the dream of that dream. I meet the ideal skepticism, or rather agnosticism, so far as it relates to the external world, by maintaining that by the senses, not only do we perceive phenomena, we perceive appearances. We perceive things appearing not merely qualities, but qualities of self in such or such a state. The conclusion to which we have come is that as by sense perception, we have a positive, though of course limited knowledge of material objects. So by self-consciousness, we have a like knowledge of self in its present action. Section 2. Sense perception and self-consciousness combined. We have been looking at these two faculties separately. Let us now look at them together. By the former we obtain a knowledge first of our own bodily frame. This we do by all the senses. We know our body is out of the thinking mind, and the organs as out of one another, and in a certain direction in reference to one another. We also know certain affections which we call tastes, odors, sounds, and colors. We know all matter is extended and is offering resistance first to our body, and then to other bodies. But at the same time that we are thus perceiving, or indeed exercising any other power, we know self, and this successively in its various moods or modes. It is the business of psychology to unfold these. These, too, do not constitute all our faculties, or even our highest achieved faculties, but they are the first exercised of all our powers, and furnish materials to all the others, which are therefore dependent on them. Sense perception and self-consciousness give us knowledge. This proposition is laid down in opposition to the very common statement that the mind begins with impressions or ideas, or presentations or phenomena. The mind commences its intelligent act with the knowledge of things, by the senses of body, our own frame, or things beyond, by the inner sense of the conscious mind in its present state and exercise. These powers may, on this account, be called the simple cognitive, because they give knowledge in its simplest form. Some would not allow that what is given us by these powers is knowledge, and no doubt it is not scientific or systemized knowledge, but still it is knowledge, a knowledge of existing things. Not epis, but gnosis. Not Wissenschaft, but Kennen. The arranged knowledge requires a previous knowledge, which it arranges. The systems or theories of philosophy which do not begin with knowledge can never get it by any subsequent or subsidiary process, and so are lauded, whether their defenders allow it or not, whether they wish it or no. In nescience, which declares that man can know nothing, or in nihilism, which affirms that there is nothing to be known, or in what is now called agnosticism. This primitive knowledge is singular. It may consist of what is afterwards discovered to be a number of objects, but it is regarded at the time as one thing. The eye may have before it a widespread scene, with diverse objects of different colors and shapes, and some of them farther removed than others, but it contemplates them as one surface. It is by a subsequent process and by higher faculties that the senses that we distinguish one part of the scene from another, this tree from this hill, the animal from the ground on which it walks. The same may be said of our knowledge by self-consciousness. We are not conscious of a thought as distinguished from a sensation. We are conscious simply of mind, as thinking or as sentient, as one or other, or both, without designating them or distinguishing them. This knowledge is said to be singular, as opposed to universal. It is of one object as it presents itself without or within us, this wall or this feeling. It is by a subsequent and a discursive process that out of the singular we form the general, but the formation of the universal always implies individual things, out of which it is fashioned. The primitive knowledge is concrete. That is, it consists of objects as they present themselves, of objects with their qualities, not of objects apart from qualities, or of qualities apart from objects, but of objects as exercising qualities. We may, by a subsequent process, separate the things thus known, the substance from the quality, or the quality from the substance, or one quality from another. Having seen a house, we can think of its walls, or its windows, or its door, or its roof. But this is by a process of abstraction, and not by mere sense perception. But in order to an abstract notion, there must be a concrete apprehension. All the apprehensions given by the senses and self-consciousness are concrete. That is, of things grown together from concresso, or of things seen together from concerno. The principles laid down in this and the preceding sections undermine that transcendental philosophy which supposes that the mind starts with such general or abstract ideas as space and time, infinity and eternity, supposed to be innate, on which ideas it would raise a huge but unstable system of speculative philosophy. It can be shown that all these ideas appear first in a singular and concrete form. It is sufficient in the meantime to remark that in sense perception we have not space in the abstract, but body contained in space and occupying space. Sense perception and self-consciousness make known things as having being. In every exercise of the senses, we know things, this organ of our body, or this ball in contact with it, as existing. It is the same in every operation of self-consciousness. We know self as planning, or proposing, or in some other exercise. Seldom indeed do we take the trouble of affirming that we ourselves exist, or that the objects before us exist. We assume it as a thing which we know, and which will be granted us. We are inclined to affirm only what may be denied, and this will not be denied, and it is superfluous, and might seem affected in us, to make any formal statement on the subject. It is implied in the exercise of our two primary capacities, that the things they look at have being. But what can be said of being? Verily, little can be said of it. The mistake of metaphysicians lies in saying too much. They have made assertions which have and can have no meaning, and landed themselves in self-created mysteries or in contradictions. So little can be affirmed of being, not because of the complexity of the idea, but because of its simplicity. We can find nothing simpler into which to resolve it. We have come to ultimate truth, and there is really no deeper foundation on which to rest it. There is no light behind in which to show it in vivid outline. In the concrete, everyone has the cognition of being, just as every man has a skeleton in his frame. But the common mind is apt to turn away from the abstract idea, as it does from an anatomical preparation, or rather it feels as if such attenuated notions belong to the regions of ghosts, where entity and quiddity, the ghosts of a defunct bodies, fly. All that the metaphysician can do is to appeal to the perception which all men form, to separate this from the others with which it is joined, and make it stand out singly and simply, that it may shine and be seen in its own light. And with this the mind will be satisfied. Who thinks of asking if the sun is light, observing that it lightens? Those who attempt anything more and to peer into the object will find that the light, like that of the sun, darkens as they gaze upon it. When I burned in desire to question them further, they made themselves air, into which they vanished. The Eleatics, who flourished 500 and 600 years before Christ, made such a being to own, and were followed by the Greek philosophers generally. I do not believe that they attach too much importance to this idea, that there are existing things in the fundamental position in metaphysics. It is a fact to be assumed, and no attempt should be made to prove it. Any professed proof will turn out to be delusive, as they cannot find anything simpler or more certain by which to establish it. The fault of the Greek philosophers, and especially of the Eleatics, consisted in making affirmations about being which have no meaning. All that we can say of being is that it is being. End of section 8.